Well, hello, and now it's time to start our Chapter 10 review of the PowerPoints, and this is the introduction, first 6 slides. So the nervous system, which is just so amazing, is there to monitor your body. It detects changes, makes decisions, and it stimulates muscles and glands to respond. And basically it says, and maintains homeostasis, but all of this is homeostasis, right? All of that is how your body is looking at things, deciding what to do about it, and if anything needs to be done, to do it. It is pretty amazing the way it all works. And the star of the show is a cell called a neuron. The neuron is what's going to be transmitting impulses. It's going to be receiving information, analyzing it, and sending it out. We looked over the neuron before, and we said that a neuron, which we'll look at in a minute, is going to have multiple dendrites. They're bringing information into the cell body, and then I'm going to have one axon, and that axon is going to be taking the information away. Now, there's going to be other cells involved in the nervous system, and they're referred to as neuroglial cells. And we're going to look at a couple different types of the neuroglial cells a little later on. But their job, as it says, is to surround and support and nourish the neurons. These are going to help keep little barriers like the blood-brain barrier, and keep all of the environment, all of this stuff out in here, all of the ions that are going to be out in there, is going to keep it clean. So it kind of helps. That's how it helps surround and support all these things. Now, the nervous system itself is broken up into two big portions. We've got a central nervous system portion, which is referred to as the CNS. It is going to consist of the brain and spinal cord, the brain and spinal cord only. And then we have the peripheral nervous system. Again, now this is called the PNS. It is going to be what connects the central nervous system to the body. So if I have a brain and a little spinal cord down here, which are the central nervous system, off of the spinal cord, I'm going to have these nerves called spinal nerves. And then we're going to look in this little special area at the brain stem where I'm going to have special nerves that come out that are called cranial nerves. Again, there are 12 cranial nerves. We'll look at these in the next chapter. But that's the peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system are all the nerves that are not part of the brain and spinal cord. And they're basically going to fall into two categories, cranial and spinal nerves. So this kind of shows you a kind of a model of it. This is the central nervous system, like we said, the brain, and the brain right here, and then its spinal cord that's coming down. This is going to be how it communicates. This picture here, all these yellow nerves that are coming off of the spinal cord, those are the spinal nerves. And then again, as we said, we're going to have cranial nerves. They're going to come off the brain stem. Now, the thing about the peripheral nervous system is that it's going to be divided up into two subcategories. We're going to have sensory division and motor division. Sensory division is bringing information in, as you can kind of see at this arrow, and then the motor is going to be the things that are going out. Right? So I'm going to have sensory means I'm sensing my surroundings. I am feeling what's going on, and all of that information that I'm feeling is being brought into the central nervous system. So it's going this way. The central nervous system is going to look on it and see if something needs to be done. Is it something angry? I need to respond. And so this is going to send a signal out if something needs to respond on a motor division. All right, so that's kind of the cycle. Now, the motor division we're going to look at a little later on is divided up into two subcategories. Somatic, soma means body. These are going to be voluntary things we can control, and basically the only thing we can control is our skeletal muscles. And then the majority of this motor division is in what we call the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the automatic pilot of our motor division. It is the things that are functioning underneath our conscious control. So that is smooth muscles and cardiac muscles and glands. Remember when we looked at the muscles, the skeletal muscle here was the only one we had voluntary control over, and the two involuntary control muscles were the smooth and the cardiac. So it just kind of makes sense. Now, the general functions of the nervous system is kind of the same pattern. We're going to have a sensory function, which is going to take information and bring it into, carried to the central nervous system. So this is what, the sensory receptors. I'm going to come back to this integrative, all right? But then the other one we looked at earlier just now was this motor function where things have been decided on, and I'm going to have an impulse that goes from the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. But this integrative here in the middle, this is kind of the cool thing, and this is generally going to be the central nervous system. The integrative function is what's going to take that sensory information and create either a sensation, a memory, and a thought. Basically, I said that wrong. We're going to have a sensation, and inside our nervous system, we're going to have memories of that sensation, and then we're going to produce thoughts of what we want to do. Is that something we like? Is it something that is pleasant and we want more of? Or is it something we want to get away from? So, for instance, the other night I'm sitting outside and there was a mosquito that landed on me. And a mosquito makes me think bad thoughts because I hate mosquitoes. They're little vampires. So I have a memory of getting bit by mosquitoes and not having fun. I have thoughts about mosquitoes that I won't share with everybody, but they're not good. So I end up having this integrative function, which is going to take my sensory information, it's going to run it through my supercomputer that is my brain, and it's going to decide if I need to do something about it. And if I need to do something about it, it sends it out, and that's a motor function. So this is kind of this big cycle, right? It comes into the brain, and then the brain makes a decision, and then the decision goes out on a motor neuron, and it's going to cause something to change. Now, like we just said in the previous slide, the motor is going to have two parts, somatic and autonomic. Somatic is voluntary, which means that I have conscious control over it. Autonomic is involuntary, which means I do not have conscious control over it. For instance, if I'm eating an apple and as I'm chewing it, there's going to be chemicals that are released, and they're going to be monitored and thought about by my central nervous system is to tell which one. So if there's a lot of carbohydrates, I'm going to release more chemicals for carbohydrates. If it's more lipids, more lipids. So that's the autonomic portion. Hopefully nobody in here is trying to think about how to digest what you ate earlier today. And then we look at just simply the neuron, and we'll talk about the different neurons as we go through the in the neuron we have different types, but in general right now all we're looking at is the basics of it. In the neuron, the basic features of a neuron is a cell body. And I told you just a minute ago on one of the previous, the somatic nervous system, soma means body. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But it is basically a normal cell body. It's got the usual things. There are a few things. We're not going to get into this chromatophilic substance called Nissl bodies. Again, not worried about that. We don't even really know what they do. Neurofilaments aren't normal, but again, it's basically a normal cell body, a nucleus and all the organelles. The big thing are the things that come off of the cell body. Dendrites come off of the cell body. They are bringing information. They are bringing information to the cell body. And you can have one or you can have multiple. They are the ones bringing stuff in. Now, once it's in the cell body is kind of thinking about what's going on. And if all of the dendrites produce an impulse that is large enough, and we'll talk about how these signals are sent, if it is large enough, the cell body will send what we will learn is called an action impulse on the axon. Axons take impulses away from the cell body, and they are going to go to other cells and communicate. They're the ones that are going to say, hey, this is what's going on. And remember that a neuron is only going to have one axon. That axon might branch millions and millions of times, but there is only going to be one axon.